The alien commander arrived on Earth with the quiet certainty of someone who had already judged what he would find. His empire stretched across dozens of systems, with fleets polished to a mirror's perfection, soldiers bred for endurance, and centuries of tactical doctrines refined into ritual. Humanity, by contrast, was a young species barely lifting itself into the stars. To him, this assignment was a courtesy inspection, a formality before folding another primitive world into the structure of the Galactic Council. He expected disorder, improvisation mistaken for strategy, and above all a lack of the discipline that civilizations require to endure. His arrogance steadied him during the descent, but it began to crack the moment he entered the academy grounds. The facility stood without ornament, practical and sharp-edged, as if carved by the will to endure rather than for comfort. He noted the geometric precision of the buildings, the rigid alignment of corridors and fields, the silence broken only by measured commands. What unsettled him was not the architecture but the atmosphere. The humans within did not shuffle, chatter, or wander. They moved with focus, every step carrying urgency. Their discipline was not mechanical but primal, as if driven by something older than training manuals, something carved into bone. The commander felt a pressure in the air, not technological, but psychological. It was the weight of a species that had learned to take struggle as its natural state. The first demonstration seemed almost unimpressive. Cadets ran across fields, vaulted obstacles, and engaged in hand-to-hand contests. Compared to his soldiers, their frames looked fragile, their endurance limited. He marked down their inefficiency, but then paused. They collapsed, rose again, vomited, pushed forward, tore skin on walls, and continued. The exercise never ended when the body failed, it ended when the will did, and the will refused to break. He saw cadets sprint on legs that had clearly torn muscles, faces streaked with blood and sweat, eyes filled with something unmeasured, an unwillingness to yield. His empire bred endurance into the flesh. Humans forged it in the mind. That difference disturbed him more than superior strength ever could. The weapon's range offered no comfort. He expected primitive ballistics, perhaps crude lasers. What he saw instead was versatility bordering on madness. Cadets shifted from rifles to pistols to blades in seamless rhythm, never clinging to one tool. They fired, reloaded, discarded, improvised. When weapons failed, they struck with helmets, tore apart drones with bare hands, and turned debris into spears. He recorded every detail, noting that they treated weapons not as sacred instruments but as disposable extensions of will. They mastered tools, then cast them aside without hesitation. A line entered his report unwillingly. If stripped of technology, they will still fight. If stripped of weapons, they will still kill. Simulations followed, staged on digital warfields vast in scope. Cadets faced overwhelming fleets, impossible terrain, and dwindling supplies. By any logical standard, the scenario was unwinnable. Yet he watched them sow chaos into order. They turned fuel shortages into bait for ambushes, let themselves appear fractured only to encircle enemies, manipulated their opponent's predictability into a trap. His own kind excelled at logic, precision, and patience. Humans weaponized unpredictability. They thrived in uncertainty, converting every weakness into a dagger. He caught himself leaning forward, disturbed by how quickly the impossible became merely improbable, and then became victory. The simulation ended with the enemy annihilated. Human casualties, overwhelming. Human morale, unbroken. The lecture hall deepened his unease. He expected tactical studies drawn from minor skirmishes. Instead, instructors spoke of entire epochs of blood. They traced lines from tribal clashes with sharpened stones to wars that scorched continents, then to conflicts fought under the shadow of nuclear fire. Each disaster was not hidden in shame but presented as a teacher. Students scribbled notes about failures that destroyed millions, defeats that reshaped nations. No wound was erased, every scar was preserved as instruction. He felt chilled as one lecturer concluded. Every defeat is a library. Every casualty is an inheritance. We carry them so we will never fall the same way twice. For a species so young, their archive of war was horrifyingly vast, and their willingness to stare into its abyss without blinking was worse. When the session ended, he overheard cadets conversing casually. They spoke not of sports or leisure, but of extinction. They argued playfully about which end would be most survivable: a comet striking, a hostile fleet arriving, a plague spreading. Instead of despair, they laughed, sketched plans, and competed to design strategies to outlast the end of the world. One cadet joked that humans would eat stone if it kept them alive. Another replied that they already had in places where famine struck. The aliens' tendrils curled at the ease with which they embraced doom as just another puzzle. Their imaginations did not fear apocalypse. They practiced living beyond it. The commander wrote furiously into his log. He had not expected to be impressed, and he was not impressed. He was unsettled, even alarmed. These were not the disciplined legions of his empire, polished and restrained by doctrine. These were creatures who refused to accept limits, who saw every injury as an obstacle to be defied, every loss as a chance to learn, every weapon as temporary, every defeat as a seed for future strength. The tour was not yet over, yet already he began to wonder whether humanity should ever be provoked. He felt the faintest tremor of fear, a fear not of their power, but of the realization that weakness, in their hands, had been turned into something far more terrifying than strength. The final stage of the commander's visit was a large-scale demonstration. He expected an elaborate parade, some display of discipline or coordination to impress foreign eyes. What he received was something darker. The cadets were thrust into a scenario that stacked odds so brutally that survival alone seemed unlikely. They were outnumbered, their resources stripped, communications cut, and the terrain engineered to punish every mistake. Yet instead of despair, they set to work like predators unleashed. Units disappeared into forests, buildings, and shadows. Explosions erupted not at the points of confrontation, but in supply routes, command hubs, and blind spots. The commander realized with horror that humans did not waste effort striking strength, they feasted on weaknesses. They sacrificed their own positions willingly, baiting larger forces into ambushes. He marked down every maneuver, disturbed by the fact that cadets treated their own losses not as failure but as part of victory's cost. When the exercise ended, the results were unmistakable. The humans had destroyed an enemy force that should have annihilated them. Their casualties were staggering, yet their cohesion never fractured. The commander found his claws digging into his datapad as he wrote, "They do not fear dying if their death feeds the pack. They do not fear bleeding if blood buys time. They measure value not in survival of the individual, but in endurance of the group." It was not the efficiency of their tactics that haunted him, but the cold acceptance of sacrifice woven into their training. His empire punished commanders for losses. Humanity instructed its children to endure them without hesitation. The Academy's medical wing unsettled him further. He anticipated advanced recovery technology, sterile wards filled with restorative devices. Instead, he found cadets limping through corridors, some bandaged, some bruised, many still sweating from drills. One recruit's arm hung freshly stitched, yet he argued with the medic to be cleared for the next session. Another, face pale from blood loss, refused sedation, insisting the pain was a reminder to improve. The commander could not comprehend a culture that turned agony into a tool. To his species, pain was something to be minimized, neutralized, avoided. Here, pain was embraced as part of the ritual, a forge in which resolve was tempered. He whispered into his recorder, voice low, "They cultivate suffering as if it were soil for strength. They teach themselves to welcome what we have spent centuries eradicating." In a moment of rare candid exchange, he questioned one of the instructors. The commander asked why they subjected their own youth to such merciless treatment. The instructor's reply was calm, almost casual. "Because the universe will not be kind. We would rather break them ourselves than allow an enemy to do it later." The alien pressed further, confused. The human's response was sharper. "Mercy in training becomes weakness in war. Weakness in war becomes extinction. We prepare them for what cannot be forgiven." The commander felt the weight of those words settle into him like iron. In his culture, cruelty was reserved for enemies. For humanity, cruelty was self-inflicted first, so no enemy could exploit them later. He found himself unsettled by the logic, not because it was irrational, but because it was terrifyingly sound. The tour wound through the Academy's museum, where history was not presented as triumph, but as endurance. Displays chronicled wars fought with sharpened stone, with bronze and iron, with muskets and cannons, with machines that darkened skies. Each catastrophe was displayed not with shame, but as testimony. Famines, plagues, nuclear annihilation narrowly avoided, all were catalogued as if humanity collected scars like medals. What disturbed him most was a recurring theme etched into every era. Every time humanity had faced extinction, they adapted, endured, and emerged stronger. On one wall a phrase was carved, stark and deliberate. "We are the children of catastrophe. We do not fear it. We are it." The commander lingered on those words far too long, unable to shake their echo. As the tour concluded, his composure unraveled. He had arrived confident, certain that his empire's precision and order would remain unchallenged. Now he scribbled private notes, with trembling hands. "They are fragile, yet cannot be broken. They are reckless, yet they do not stop. They embrace chaos until it bends to their will. Against them, war will not be a contest of strength but of endurance. And endurance belongs to them." He tried to calculate outcomes, scenarios, probabilities, yet the numbers blurred. His own fleets, disciplined and rigid, could not comprehend an enemy that weaponized unpredictability. His legions, raised to fear disorder, would collapse against foes who thrived in it. What chilled him most was the realization that humans did not simply survive war. They became more dangerous because of it. When he returned to the Galactic Council, the commander's demeanor was no longer calm. His report was not a recommendation but a warning. He described humanity as perilous allies and catastrophic enemies. He spoke of cadets who laughed at extinction, who turned suffering into discipline, who carved triumph out of impossible odds. He cautioned that to provoke them would not invite battle but endless struggle, one where even defeat would not extinguish them. His final words were grim. "If alliance is necessary, proceed with care. If conflict is considered, abandon the thought. They are not a species to conquer. They are a species to fear." The council chamber listened in silence as his words echoed. To outsiders, humans looked ordinary, flesh vulnerable to fire, bodies frail compared to armored species, lives brief compared to civilizations measured in millennia. But beneath that frailty burned a force unmatched. Their madness was not a flaw. It was a weapon sharpened across ages of catastrophe. Their scars were not burdens but blueprints for survival. Their laughter in the face of doom was not denial but defiance. The commander, who had toured the academy with the arrogance of superiority, returned hollow-eyed, carrying the weight of what he had witnessed. He did not fear their ships or their weapons. He feared their refusal to accept defeat, their hunger to endure beyond reason, their joy in the struggle itself. For his kind, war was calculation. For humanity, war was existence. And existence was something they would never surrender. The conclusion to his record was simple, yet devastating. "I came to measure their strength. Instead, I found their weakness turned into something worse than strength. They are survivors. Survivors without limit. Survivors without end."